Welcome, people. Welcome to this very first youth participation forum ever happened. And we need to welcome also the people from home. Thank you very much for being there and having this very special moment for starting the discussion, or maybe continue the discussion of what means meaningful youth participation. This forum has been organized, from SALTO Participation and Information, that is hosted by the Estonian National Agency. And we are very happy that we have here with us Reet Kost, the deputy head from the Estonian National Agency, to welcome us and also to say some very important things.
Thank you very much, Evi. And it was nice to feel the shoulder feeling with you all. And I'm happy that I can stay also for the coming days and have good conversations. But first and foremost, I would like to warmly welcome you all to Tallinn and to Estonia. It is really a big honor for us to hold this forum on youth participation, which, as Evi said, it's the very first one in the history of SALTO being hosted in Estonia, and I think also in the history of having the strategy for the youth participation related to the Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps, which also is quite a recent development. Holding this forum here in Estonia really brings me back 5 years when we were inventing what we want to do as a SALTO resource center if we get the chance, because there was a competition amongst the national agencies network, and the Commission then chose one of the ones that had some good vision for the SALTO. And now, looking 5 years and many expert group meetings, strategy group meetings, study visits, webinars, having a diverse approach to youth participation, not only looking at participation in a very focused manner, but looking at digital transformation, looking at the media literacy, looking at information that empowers participation. I really am really happy to see the progress we have made. And not only us, the team of SALTO colleagues around me, really a big thanks to you all, and also being here now, having these conversations in the coming days with you all. I really am looking forward to that. To say a little bit about the future, then, like Evi promised, we have also a good announcement to make with regards to SALTO participation information extension. We will extend from the youth field our activities also to education and training field, and being the sports national agency, which starts also decentralized activities, I'm sure we will get there as well, or at least a lot of sports organizations are also very active in the youth field, in education training field. So I'm happy to say that from next year we will have some more colleagues joining the SALTO team and working in close cooperation between these sectors of youth, education, training and sports, and seeing how far we can take this vision that we had for youth participation, or enabling youth participation through looking at the potential of Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps programs, and trying to also open our eyes as national agency, and together with the other national agencies and SALTOs, as well as the European Commission and the organizations in the field, to see what is the potential, how can we enable, how can we empower the organizations that enable youth participation in democratic life, but also how can we then extend the horizon. So I'm happy you are here, to see a lot of familiar faces and to see a lot of new faces that I have never seen, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Being around for many years, this is the nice thing that you can summarize in a short time what is happening and how the things they have been evolved. Important words, cooperation, so as we go further, but cooperation So it has to be, you know, like efficient one. We need coordination. So this forum to take place, but also moreover the strategy to go on. We have Alexandre Fonseca, that is the youth participation coordinator. And yes, now is the moment for applause, and thank you people also from the home.
Thank you. First of all, I already said it, I think yesterday, we had a meeting of the co-steering group of the youth participation strategy, and I will explain how it all relates. But I said at the beginning that I'm just grateful. That's the feeling that I have, that all of you are here. We have, unfortunately, still the situation that one participant couldn't have a visa, or we are trying to communicate with him if he can have the visa to still come. It still happens in 22. That's the feeling overall of gratefulness and just happy, joyful that all of you are here for the Youth Participation Forum. We have 3 events in one, so it's like these shampoos that you can use for different things. We have the co-steering group meeting yesterday. We are very grateful to have this special group of people, very active group of young people and people from institutions. We have the forum itself, and we have the SALTO Awards. So we get 3 in 1. I think it's a good deal. And 3 reasons why we have the Youth Participation Forum now. Like Reet mentioned, we have the Youth Participation Strategy. We created, or it was drafted among a big group of people, mostly like yourself, trainers, researchers, national agency officers, experts, consultants, European Commission as well. It was created in beginning of 2021. There was something that happened in 2020 that we don't talk about, so we couldn't have physical events. And that's one of the reasons why we're here. The second reason is this: we have this connection. Youth participation, non-formal education is done with feeling, is done with heart, it's done with emotions, and it's done with hands, in appropriate way, in respectful way. So this is the second reason why we are here. And third is to face the future. We're gonna hear two speeches later today from Andreas and from Anna, and thank you already for being here. We are facing multiple challenges. Since I'm alive, we faced crisis after crisis, so I think we are just living in a permanent crisis. We don't even know which one is which anymore, but we have many challenges that we have to face in youth participation, in participation in general, and for us internally, it will also be participation, not just youth participation, but of course, we will keep a special place for youth and for youth participation in our own work, in our own minds, in our own hearts, and in our own hands. Yeah. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, this when it is coming from the heart, it's something like that, and we all know because we are all connected to this value-based field, and so we can really feel what Alexandre said. Yeah, cooperation, coordination is needed, but also that is a need of the field, is the need to communicate that, to communicate that to the outer world or to more people, to get to know how important it is. I think that Louis, that he is the coordinator of the strategic communication in SALTO. Yes, that's it.
So, hi, I'm Louis Biasin. I'm the last addition to the team, I guess, yes. I joined in March, and yes, I'm focusing on strategic communication. I think there is no good participation without good communication, without good information also. So it might sound like I'm more on the information part, but I think the two are really interconnected. I mainly support national agencies in promoting better the opportunities of participation. But I'm also supervising the area of promotion and outreach on the the participation pool I was testing. Yeah, I go very often there, as you can see. And also I'm promoting all the opportunities of participation created by my colleagues. Made a lot of communication on the forum, on the awards. And I think I see communication as an essential supportive activity. And I think the more strategical it is thought through, the more efficient it is. And I think that's all.
Well, no, yeah, important. Thank you very much for that. I think, yeah, communication and using the tools that they are around. So, yeah, Melika will explain a bit more, being the media and information literacy coordinator of SALTO. So, yeah, the floor is yours.
Hello, I think next year we need a bigger stage, but barely fitting here. It's really nice to see all of you. I just traveled back 2 days ago from Barcelona, where we were hosting a media information literacy study visit. Met very many interesting people, organizations, and what we learned from there is that youth work community and education community often is not aware that they are also working on media and information literacy. And I see media and information literacy, or we all see in the SALTO PI team, as one of the preconditions for youth participation. And what do I mean by this? There is the saying, as Louis said, there is no participation without information. So without being able to find information and access information, how will you make decisions? How will you participate? How will you be aware what's going on? Without the skills of critically analyze and evaluate content, how are your decisions really empowering you, or are they hindering you? And we are not, of course, talking only about political participation, but even what kind of brand do I trust, or what kind of school do I choose, or who do I turn to for help when it comes to cyberbullying or hate speech, all youth work topics very closely. Additionally to finding and analyzing information, very important is also to know how to use media. And I think this is relevant not only for the young people and youth workers, but it's a survival skill for anybody. And the media constantly changes. We constantly need to relearn, unlearn, learn again. So I think the topic is really relevant to be either an active citizen or just be citizen who has access to democratic participation. And also just the fact that we should be mindful about how media and information is used, for instance, either to manipulate us or to keep us away from some processes. But also it's a powerful tool to speak our voices, to make youth work more visible, to make our work more visible and more recognized. And we need this because recognition of youth work and education is essential also for the democratic societies. So this is how we feature media and information literacy as one of the pillars to youth participation, but also civic participation at large.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Because the need came also for what we experienced all together, coming closer, get familiar, be aware of what the power of social media, of the digital world and the ways of communication. But as concerns digitalization, I think that Katri will explain a bit more, that she is the digital transformation coordinator in SALTO.
Hello, everybody. It is wonderful to be here and see you here. And as Melika, the same way, I just arrived back yesterday, and it's still a bit hard to feel myself sitting here back in Estonia, because October was for me for exploring digital transformation in very, very tangible, practical way together with national agencies and youth workers. But maybe I will just give a little brief what we have been doing, and I know several of you have been involved in these processes. But yeah, to just explore it a little bit, I have worked for SALTO PI on this topic for 2 years now. And I started to look into these digital spaces where also participation happens, yeah, about the time when the new program guide came out with new priority digital transformation. So when we looked into this, then the question came: so what is it as for a youth organization, for example, or how can you actually tangibly see it or measure it or understand? Are you in transformation? Do you use whatever tools are accessible in a way that also some kind of change is happening? And what does this change actually mean? So we together, about with 25 experts and researchers and around Europe, explored this in a participatory way. And yes, the aim was to define it a little bit for working, so it's possible to kind of understand how it is like landing for youth field, and also how to see it from different aspects, like what does it contain of. So we also combine together a framework that can be used. For example, you are creating a project, and then you can see, is this project also sustainable? Are the digital rights considered there? What is the inclusive aspect? What about the ethics? Like, are any emerging technologies involved there? So this is something we created. You can find the reports which were created during this process out there on a table. If they are ending, then yeah, you can leave your name, and we are happy to also share with them. But they also, of course, they are also online accessible. You can find them in this platform, which we should everybody know, which is Participation Resource Pool. Yes, and also another report that is there you can find. This is more maybe for national agencies on focusing on how digital transformation appears in the program and how it can be seen, what are the challenges, etc. So furthermore, what happened in October? We took this framework, we took this work, and we invited youth workers to join us on a little longer journey, let's say. We started in Vilnius, and we end in Armenia in April. So we will go through different framework aspects. We look into participation, we look into education, we look into sustainability, etc. It's partly online, partly offline, so it's a blended learning. It's also hybrid, so because we have to consider that sometimes not everybody can still join while they would still want to join. So this is what is happening, and this is one of the things that kept me a little bit busy in October. The other thing was that we also explored it together with national agencies just 2 weeks ago now, and that was really interesting, let's say, adventure into the topics in more detail. And maybe finally that is affecting me most, or let's say while I am in transformation, is that there's a new SALTO that is emerging in Helsinki, in Finland, SALTO Digital. So now there is a SALTO that is focusing on this topic, and I can slowly give away this, what we have learned, what we have experienced, and they can choose what they can use. While I will focus more on the participation, the digital spaces, and one of the projects that we are currently running is, for example, how to use existing mainstream video games for looking into democracy and participation. So yeah, very excited to have these conversations with you as well, who is interested. And I think this is it from me.
Yeah. Thank you very much. How many things they have happened and how many things they will be there in the future. A lot. Kelly, you are also a member of SALTO Participation and Information, with a very, very important role. Yeah, can you explain a bit more?
Yes. Hello, everyone. So, as said, I'm Kelly, and I'm the specialist in the team. And I'm really I fulfill a supportive role to the team. So to all these beautiful coordinators that just spoke, in some way I'm involved in every area of our work. And also the support, I would say to a large extent, comes in a formal sense. That one thing is the content we are trying to create, the ideas we are trying to put forward, or the guidelines and steering we are trying to give to the European youth field. But I would say that I come in order to also make sure that it's all done in the form that should it should be done in. So I'm taking care that all our contracts are correct. I'm also taking care that all the contracts get closed and so on. So there's a lot of paperwork that goes into my work. And you might think that maybe it's a little dry, but actually working across Europe, you know, we don't have one legislative space in Europe. So I would say that every case brings something new and something interesting. And yeah, funnily enough, you can get quite sucked into all the interesting legal aspects of our work. So in a nutshell, I would say that's what I do. And I also try to, of course, support in another way, where events like this or some other projects we might be doing, like the study visits and whatnot. So there I also help with miscellaneous tasks, let's call it that. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a comment, sorry people from the home, that in the morning, that this etc. thing, how important it is, and etc. characterization of things. So yeah, we all know what means to work with the programs and the bureaucratic aspect of them. So yeah, thank you very much for the SALTO members and also from Reet, from Estonian NA, but we have one more guest in our panel that is Carmen, and representing Reet network. That maybe it is a question mark there, and I think that she has very interesting also points to raise.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation, also for being able to be part of the official opening with the colleagues from SALTO Participation and Information, and to be able also to tell you a bit about the Reet network and its activities. So the project manager and the coordinator of the European Youth Research Network, which the abbreviation Reet, which is actually coordinated by the Finnish National Agency for Education, so I'm working there. And we're doing the transnational coordination, and you will also meet my colleague, Andreas Karsten, in a bit. He's part of the Reet transnational research team, and he will tell you a bit more about our findings on youth participation. Yeah, but the question mark, what is Reet? Maybe not all of you are so familiar with it. So Reet stands for Research-Based Analysis of the European Youth Programs, meaning both programs, the Erasmus Plus Youth Program and the European Solidarity Corps. At the moment, we are a network with 34 partners all over Europe. And when I speak about partners, I mean national agencies, but also researchers, national researchers in all our partner countries. Yeah, and Reet was founded in 2008, and basically our main aim, I would say, is to monitor the impact and the effects of the youth programs, and yeah, but also to contribute to the quality when it comes to the implementation of the program and the further development, and to support also the recognition, I would say, of non-formal learning and education. And I think another important pillar for us is to ensure the dialogue, or to promote this dialogue between this triangle of policy, practice, and research also. Yeah, at the moment we have 7 research projects ongoing, and our basis, our core, are the monitoring service, which we conduct regularly with beneficiaries and participants of the youth program. So if you have been involved in a project, you might have received a questionnaire from us at one or the other point. Yeah, and in these questionnaires, we of course ask also about skills and competences of organizations, participating organizations, beneficiaries, project leader, youth workers, but of course young people, also in terms of participation. So we get a lot of data from there. But yeah, we have also other thematic research projects, and I don't know if you want to know now more about them or a bit later. Yeah,
in a while, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, we will have different moments, and also in a while that the questions that will be here for our panel. SALTO Participation and Information is the one coordinates, organizes this forum, but this forum will not take place if it was not more support, Alexandre, from other entities. And yeah, it's the point to mention them. We have 13 more NAs, national entities, supporting the forum to take place. And I will read so as not to forget. So, of course, Estonian national entity, the national entities from Austria, Cyprus, Finland, Germany, Italy, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Portugal, Switzerland, and Slovakia, they support it, plus the SALTO Youth South East Europe. So, yeah, this means coordination and being the maestro of so many entities, people, actors, elements that they need to be there on place. So we are here, but also the people from the home, and so the bridge to the youth field to happen. So it needs to be to Alexandre the first question that what this event is meaning to you. I mean, it is a hidden why there also. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe just to start to clarify why this session, why Ray Network is here together with SALTO Participation. Carmen was saying that she's feeling a bit like an intruder, but she's not an intruder at all. We are here, SALTO Participation Information, but SALTO as a network and Ray Network, because these are two institutions that support directly both programs, both Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps. So we have people here from European Youth Forum, from different agencies, different institutions, but these two are directly connected to the programs to support the quality of the program. So you can choose the word, but we are here to support you or serve you. So you can choose, but this is our mission, this is our role, to support the quality of the programs. The what or the why, I think the why is more interesting, of what does this event mean to me? That was the question. Personally, it's, yeah, I get not emotional, but I'm not so emotional. I relate a lot to Estonia, so I'm not that emotional, but maybe I shouldn't say this. Let's delete this, let's delete this.
We cannot delete that.
Delete, please. No, but I get quite, like I said before, quite joyful, quite grateful, and it's really a joy to be here. Personally, again, for the team to be together. Honestly, for the first time, we are quite particular in the way we work. We work well away from each other. I don't know if we work better away from each other or together, but yeah, we've been working, like you heard, quite separately. Personally, it's a joy to be together again with the team. To meet the Kost group for the first time, we had already 3 meetings, 2 meetings. This was the 3rd one, and I think I'm looking at trying to find the people from the co-steering group. I think all the people in the co-steering group were mentioning yesterday how important it was to meet together, and as much as we want and we need to respect sustainability, travel. I think we tried to do that here, but we also, at least personally, I always emphasize or remind myself of this importance of meeting together, and I repeat myself, but it's not the same thing working face to face as working online. And finally, I can say that I said this morning that I started as a volunteer, so I still keep this experience as a volunteer, as a part of, or I did European Voluntary Service. I still keep this experience quite fresh. I try to relate to it as much as I can in my own work. And further down the line, I became a project manager for a youth organization and working with the national agency of my own country. And it doesn't mean that it was anything wrong with the national agency there. It was just my impression is that the national agency was here and the youth organization was here. And now I see it totally reverse. I see that the national agencies, I see how much they are making an effort every day. Most of you from youth organizations might not even be aware of the difficulties, of the challenges, of the efforts that they are putting. And it was really important for me to meet the people behind national agencies. And for you, I hope you get the chance also to meet them, to understand that they are not necessarily your friends, but they are also here to support you, not to evaluate you, not to judge how good your project is. That's also a part. But the more and more I find, and the more I work with national agencies, the more I find the spirit of working together with youth organizations to make better projects. And I hope that you, coming from different institutions in the youth field, from youth organizations, that you also find this spirit with the people here from the national agencies. Even this morning, I had an email from Linda from National Agency of Netherlands, and she was saying good luck for the forum, of course, but also for the participants from Netherlands to know that you can reach her, that she's there for you. So I don't find now the people from the Netherlands, but just know that Linda is there. 3 of you are there, so that Linda is there for you to support you in your youth participation projects. And of course, Marlena, Kati, Anna, Adele, all the other people from national, Malta, Carmelo, all the people from national agencies that are here to support you and to make sure that the youth participation, youth work, youth projects are better. So the big why is to get together, to build this spirit of community. And yeah, I was thinking about this question yesterday. I think we all know, I think you don't need me to tell you, that active citizens are better citizens for themselves, are better citizens for democracies, are better citizens for their own communities. So I'm not the person that needs to tell you, I'm just reminding you so you don't forget it when you are demotivated. So you just keep it in mind. What did that stupid guy said once? Just that, active citizens are better citizens for everyone. It's a cliche, it's very simple, but yeah, I think that's the why that I would like to transmit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We will continue with some questions. We have already with Rodrigo some in mind, but also feel free that if you want to ask whatever, or you got inspired for what you listened, you can raise your hand and then a microphone will come slowly towards you and you can raise your question. We will continue a bit more so as to give you the time also to think on that. And sorry people from the home for that moment that we cannot interact so actively, but at least you are here with us, listening and maybe digesting all the info and points that they are raised. So I think that especially when you are a newcomer and you hear so many abbreviations and so many entities and so many structures, oh, what it is this SALTO and then A, and then they say RE, and then they say more things, and this is commission, and who is there up there in the hierarchy, and how this huge thing, and I don't mention more, like snacks or I don't know, then we go to the organization names, so many things. And I use the word of things in purpose because they are so diverse. The thing is that something is happening. And Reet, the question goes for you. There are so many there, how all this system is working together? Is coordinated, or how the structures they cooperate? Is there a system, a very strict system? So give us a bit an overview also from the human side, not so the technical side that is there and it is present. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, indeed, it's a complex system. Well, this year is an anniversary year. Do you know of what?
Anybody knows?
Anybody know what 35th birthday this year stands for? That's 25. The agency in Estonia is 25 years old, but exactly, yes. So this is how far back I think we go with the European programs, also youth programs, and the network of national agencies. So this is the implementing bodies at the national level of both programs nowadays, which the predecessor of European Solidarity Corps, as many of you probably as volunteers have experienced, was European Voluntary Service, and we have carried on with it, with extending the scope of the program, with less investment from the European Parliament and the national authorities, unfortunately. But we hope that this will change with the support of Ray and the findings and also the lobby work, because the midterm evaluation of the programs is coming up. But coming back to the structures, so there is more than 35 national agencies, there is a lot of SALTOs involved. I'm not going to the numbers anymore because it's really been a system that has been developing, and of course these liaise most closely with the European Commission, who is the motor behind the program documentation, the application system, the reporting system, and the one that gathers the funding and then gives it back to the national agencies to further disseminate the funding. So this has been a long-standing and long-evolving structure of national agencies. I know that not every national agency is as well resourced, human resource-wise, but also funding-wise, because usually the funding is always the European money together with the national funding. So it's always a challenge to also be very close to the applicants or the target groups, to have good communication system, because sometimes the resources of national agencies are limited. So we try our best. In Estonia, I can really say that we are doing fairly well and are also privileged in this situation, because we are well resourced and also have the SALTO to back us with know-how and resources there. But in the recent years, the national agencies have also started a lot of strategic cooperation programs or projects. So not only the field is not doing the strategic cooperation partnerships, but also the national agencies are doing. And with regards to youth participation, we have two of these strategic cooperation projects between a lot of national agencies. And these are called New Power in Youth, which is also led by Estonian National Agency and in partnership with the SALTO participation and information and a good project coordinator, Veronica, who is also with us. But there is also another one which is called Democracy Reloading, and it's focused more on the municipal youth workers and their capacity and professionalism in fostering and supporting youth participation. So these are recent bigger developments, also not only between the national agencies, but pooling and connecting with the national stakeholders, with the organizations. And so this structure or system of cooperation is also getting wider and wider. There is also national authorities involved. There is also municipal youth workers networks or bigger organizations that stand for youth work and education. So I think also this is another challenge to be both the implementer of the programs and the funder of projects, and doing that professionally, because it needs to start with a very good communication, information strategies, and ending up with good consultation systems and services, up to the very monitoring and evaluation of the project results and program results and impact. And at the same time, carrying the two other roles, which is to support the development of youth work and to be there to also input to the youth policy at national and European level. So for that also the national agencies cannot work in silos, but need to have close proximity or close contact with the target group, with the field, with the organizations in the field, and also with young people. So I'm especially excited to find out also during this forum, what can we conclude from looking into this? How far along are we as national agencies or as structures in being close to young people, or being participatory or fostering participation as organizations? And where can we take it from there if we find out that we're not too far? And how can we do that? So recommendations also are something that I think we're really looking for, and initiation. So it's not maybe also something that we can always ourselves go to the field and start the processes, but also being very inviting to the field to come to the national agencies. As Alex said, somebody is waiting for you in the Dutch national agency, so are we. So not just when you have a project to consult about, but also when you have a good idea or a need with respect to youth participation or youth policy in general. You want to lobby for something, let's talk, and let's see who are the people that we can connect you with and bring together, or offer floor for coming together, communicating decision makers, stakeholders, young people, and this is what the national agencies can offer, with or without the strategic cooperation partnerships, but especially linked to them. I don't know if I actually answered your question.
Yeah, you answered that it happened what we expected to happen, that when you first listen, you think this is complex, but when you dive more, then you understand that it is even more complex, and there are many crossroads around, and there are many processes like action lines, top down, down up, horizontal, from all the different fields, but this is the magic of what we are doing. So, yeah, complexity and sometimes seems like threatening, but it's not, is also the base of creation. So in these crossroads, I mean, like how interaction is happening, and I'm coming back to you, Carmen. So Reet Network, how is connected specifically with youth participation? What exactly, how you exactly support the youth participation strategy or actions?
Yeah, Reet is, as I already said before, we are conducting this regular monitoring service, which of course also include questions about participation, about youth participation, but we also have thematic research project, particularly on participation and citizenship education. And I'm talking about two projects which are already finalized. One was about the long-term effects of participation and citizenship education and learning. Basically the question, does the Erasmus Plus Youth program support the competence development and the learning when it comes to this? And then a follow-up project which looked a bit more at the methods and the approaches which are actually needed or efficient, which are efficient basically to support further competence development when it comes to participation and citizenship learning. So Reet is trying, of course, with the research findings, then also to not only, as I said before, contribute to quality implementation of the program, but also with this evidence-based information and knowledge to bring it to the policy field in Europe. Yeah, and I think an important part of our work is, of course, not only conducting the research, but also communicating and disseminating it. Yeah, we try to do this, of course, on a transnational level, so to stakeholders in the youth programs, but also outside the youth programs, to policy and decision makers, practitioners, multipliers, who then also support us in communicated to beneficiaries, and our national partners are doing this on national level and yeah, adapting it to their realities, to their national contexts, and yeah, so we try to support with evidence-based knowledge.
Yeah, that was a need in the past to be covered, and for you being here, but also for the ones being in the home, a reminder that after the break that we will have Andreas with us explaining a bit more and seeing how this comes to practice, and also we will have more moments for the people attending the forum to discover a bit more for in the next days. Rodrigo, I think that also you would like to ask things.
Yeah, just before we open a bit more the floor for the group to have some questions. Some of you already mentioned some of the future either projects or things to implement. Is there anything else you want to share, something specific that's going to happen in the near future before we open for more questions?
This is the part I was not prepared for. There were so many things in my mind, but I think for next year we are very glad to continue with the youth co-steering group of the youth participation strategy. There will be a new mandate. What we want to do with the current people is to co-create. This is a very important word for SALTO participation information. Co-create the new mandate, the new people, the new members, the new co-steering group for 2023 to 2024, and with the extension to the education sector, also how this will affect the co-steering group of the youth participation strategy. I emphasize the youth participation strategy. Also, we will have next year, together with Veronica, with the project New Power in Youth, a training for not just for trainers, but a training for experts, consultants, whatever the name we will find. Not just to go beyond the dimension of trainer, but also to bring expert knowledge to youth participation and to youth participation. This will happen around September, October of next year. And one more thing that is important for SALTO participation information is the EU-Youth Dialogue, together with the European Youth Forum. We are hoping and we are very glad to host or to support the hosting of the National Working Group of the EU Youth Dialogue. So different national working groups, which is another dimension of the program. Sorry for the for the many complexity on top of complexity, but the National Working Group of the EU Youth Dialogue, it brings together people from national agencies, youth organizations. Leo from the European Youth Forum is there, can also give you more information, more specificity about the importance of the EU Youth Dialogue. But it's something that we are very glad to emphasize and to cooperate with the European Youth Forum. And I think these are the three highlights, or some of the highlights for next year. I would just repeat very briefly. The co-steering group of the youth participation strategy, the training for experts on youth participation, and the hosting of the national working groups of the EU Youth Dialogue.
Yeah. Thank you. Just also, some of us might be a bit curious about this co-steering group we've been hearing. So tomorrow is going to be also space to discover a bit more about it. For now, it stays like this.
I think that you also have activities to mention.
I mean, all of us, whole work plan, but we are not going to go into this. But to simplify, I will mention a few things. The participation resource pool, which we developed, created, are testing, recreating, learning, developing. It's a never-ending process. It will continue. And the aim of this is that we are, after all, a resource center. So we try to gather quality resources in all of those topics. And there are hundreds of resources, tools, materials available on topic of youth participation, media and information literacy, communication and digital transformation, which you can use when you host a discussion, trainings, when you just want to up your own level. So dive in, check it out when you haven't yet. This is something where we also are expecting your quality resources and tools and materials, because we are not trying to create anything ourselves. We also want to feature and spotlight the good work done in the European youth field in general and promote it. So definitely something that the whole team will be continuing working with. As for media information literacy, we are planning next spring, a MIL project lab, so media and information literacy project lab, to encourage more projects in the Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps that connect youth participation and MIL, because they are very connected, and we have been mapping the project's platforms, are also trying to work more and more to see what is there, what is missing, what are the gaps, where are the opportunities to be more successful as a community, as a European community, to boost youth participation, to make sure that those crises on top of crises are not going to take us back to some time in the 30s, 1930s of European history, so that we are, as a youth work community, able to step up to the challenge that we are facing. So, of course, it's a small activity, but the format could be transferred to all the countries. So if you're interested, just stay tuned in the SALTO training calendar and you can participate.
Yeah, an important check in the calendar. Andrew, you also, I think that you have to share something with our audience.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So definitely, as I mentioned before, we have an ongoing training on digital transformation. It's called Digital Transformers. But parallelly with the Transformers, we are also doing online panel sessions. And those panel sessions are focusing on the same topics that I already mentioned. So they go through the framework. We will bring together experts to discuss on those topics. For example, next Tuesday now at 1 p.m. CET, we have a panel session on inclusion and participation in the age of digital transformation. And in December, beginning of December, or maybe it's end of November, we have a discussion on digital sustainability. And we continue in January, end of January, we have digital well-being. Then we will discuss digital rights in the end of February or beginning of March. And finally, we look into emerging technologies. So this is all available, of course. We have it in the participation resource pool. We also communicate through all our channels. So if you're interested, it's usually on Tuesday at 1 p.m. CET, but the day is varying through this 6 months, what we are doing. So this is one activity where it's possible to get involved.
A very good question. I'm so amazed. First question and already so deep. I can answer from a personal perspective. I come from the background of activism. I was working, I was also volunteering, doing EVS. I was in National Youth Council, so I've been a youth delegate in the conferences. I've felt that what is happening. And I joined SALTO also straight from activism, environmentalism background. So I personally do not identify myself as someone who is institutional. And I think the whole team is similar. When we learn about the backgrounds a little bit, it's more activists in institutions, but at the same time, the role of SALTO is in a way sort of like a free agent. We are connected, but we are quite autonomous, and we regularly work with many experts, young people, youth organizations, youth workers from outside. And this is also the answer, how do we manage because we are fully aware that our own capacity, even from the background of youth organizations and activism, is still limited. We are still within our own bubble, but we are using in the best way, we are consulting, engaging various different types of people profiles. So starting from the think tank of SALTO Youth Participation, which was initiated in 2018, for also the various expert groups. So institutions are always there, but we try to bring these communities together. And Alex can comment the toolkit, for instance, or the strategy. They were not created by bunch of institutionalists for the young people. So we don't see that you can do something for young people without engaging them. But of course, the question is then how many? How many young people can you engage as a small team? So definitely there are challenges there, but at the same time, I think at least in our team, nobody would define yourself as an important institutional Thai person at all.
Red wall. Yeah,
I can comment. I think it's, again, congratulations on the question. I think it's an amazing question. I think often about this question myself, how much I bring of myself to the institution, to SALTO participation. How much should I bring to the institution? What is the limits? What are the borders? What is the activism? What is the institutional? It's complicated. I think on the positive side, I feel at least, hopefully also the rest of the team, that we represent something bigger than ourselves. We are not just ourselves here. We are not just Alex, Louis, Melika, Kadri, Kelly. We are, like Melika said, I don't know the exact word, but free agent, the bridge, or we have this vision and also mission of trying to connect different people, different institutions. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Yeah, I can try more. I think personally, again, I struggle. I wouldn't define myself necessarily as an activist, but for sure I would also not define myself as someone coming from institutions. I'm someone that likes to connect with people, and I know that many of us say this. I like more than connecting people with other people that can do great things together. Yeah, we have our limits. We are not necessarily under the Commission, under the European Commission, but I don't know the exact word, but we...
This ... it is even more.
We are supporting the Commission with European programs, European youth programs. And of course, there are many responsibilities, many... I need to be careful with my words. Many... Exactly. Accountability that comes from there. So there's always these limits. There will always be these limits. We cannot be fully activists. I think no one expects that from an organization such as SALTO Participation Information. But I think if we bring our activism, if we bring our values, like Evie said, value-based, we only enrich the field, hopefully. Let me rephrase, hopefully we will enrich the field.
And Reet, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex question, so I'm not going to congratulate for the question, but it's a relevant question, definitely. When it comes to SALTO, then I don't know if anybody has dechiffrerend. I don't know how it's in English, but the SALTO is support to advanced training and learning opportunities resource center. So it's a structure within the Erasmus Plus program, and now also within European Solidarity Corps program to work with organizations, not with citizens usually, but to have a more sustainable effect and a systematic effect. So, but the national agencies definitely are much more accountable when it comes to also public funding and making it available in a most professional way, also securing that there is transparency, that there is accountability, there is segregation of duties and all that. And at the same time, we are also trying to be active part of youth field. And especially in Estonia, I see that we do it through being close to our target group and creating the space for them to come to the trainings, to have a linkage with them through the dialogue in the trainings, also creating or developing together with them the trainings that develop their capacity and professionalism in working also for the goals of youth participation. And at the same time, we need to make sure that there are systems where the youth NGOs or Estonian Youth Council, for example, or students' unions and other youth participation organizations can have a say in the system or in the organization, in the coordination, in the impact and results of the program. So I would say that I can't say for the whole network, I can't say for every single national agency, but definitely in Estonia, also this formal system where national youth organizations can have a say. There is a national steering committee of both Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps programs, which the national authority calls together. They have their footage there, they have their representatives there. There is also a selection panel of projects where youth NGOs, equally to youth work NGOs, are represented. So we try to create the system, the systematic approach, and be transparent. In the New Power in Youth project, we are also experimenting to develop ourselves as a more engaging organization, youth participatory fosterer. So we have a group of young people that we have also regularly come together and that we want to consult about the different processes, be it then developing the program or youth participation format, which is forever developing and never enough simple. But there we are in the advisory groups or in the consultation groups that the Commission gathers. We try to be active there and not just represent the national agency point of view, but also the applicant's point of view, the target group's point of view. So we need to have these consultation and connection points, and this is what we can do and should do equally in all the national agencies.
Thank you for the reactions. And more? It can be a question, it can be also a reaction from the side of the audience. Yes. I needed to use the correct word, yeah.
No. Now that you said, is that thing on? This one? Yeah. It's turned off. Turn off. Turn it on. 1, 2, 3. Oh, this is
yes,
better.
now.
Okay, very cool. Well, then a reaction which really is a thank you, because one of the things that SALTO PI has done as part of the strategy that we have as a sector and under your guidance and leadership developed is actually something slightly crazy, also a little bit embarrassing, but ultimately very, very cool, because even though the youth program of the European Union has promoted youth participation for 33 years, for most of those 33 years, there were no youth participation mechanisms for the implementation of the program. And now under Goal 5, if you see there in this funny brochure, under Goal 5, you have actually started introducing them. And several national agencies now have things like youth advisory groups, youth consultation groups. And it's long overdue, but it's so good that this finally happens. And thank you very much for the leadership on that and for making that happen after such a long time of the sector, I think, waiting and hoping for that. So really, really cool to see youth participation happening also for the implementation of the programs.
Thank you for that, because I think that you are the voice for many thoughts in the minds of the people here and also from home. Yeah, you want to react?
No, I just want to, thank you. And at the same time, just want to emphasize also that not long ago, there have been established 4 priorities, which are cross programs and cross-sectoral, and participation is one of them. So I think that also shows, and also this is the first program period of 7 years where actually the EU strategy has advanced the program and not the other way around. So literally the European youth strategy has become the aims and objectives of the Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps programs in the field of youth. And now we're also stretching this, especially with the participation, because the target group of young people and youth field is really something to look at as an example, as a good example, and extending this also to the education field. So just wanted to also emphasize that the programs are more and more looking at these 4 priorities. Besides the participation, there is also inclusion and diversity, which is very closely connected to participation. There's also digital transformation or supporting that, again, closely linked to participation, and green or sustainable environmental use of the programs and contribution to society. So that, again, very much connected to activism. So if we can align actually the resources that we have in the Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps with these 4 priorities mainly, I think we can do major progress.
Thank you, Reet. Alexandre.
Yeah, thank you, Andreas. I think my reaction to your reaction might help to answer the question that Pietro made before, which is the personal, the institutional. When I came to this position last year, I was wondering the paradox. Personally, what is the paradox of national agencies working within youth work, which is we talk about non-formal education, we talk about participatory methods, and the national agencies, like you said, were not involving young people for the most part. This was my personal side, screaming. And then the institutional side started to realize, like I said before, the obstacles, the challenges, with the implementation of the program, sometimes itself, that national agencies find or have. And the institutional side kicked in saying, okay, we need to go slow, we need to go steady, but we need to give small steps to have this youth involvement. So I think this mixture, like I said before, of the personal and the institutional is important. To understand the limits of other institutions, to understand the limits of our own institutions. I know, and this is not a criticism, this is empathizing with youth organizations and empathizing with myself from the past, that youth organizations also always scream for more from national agencies, and they are entitled to, but just understand that also national agencies are under immense scrutiny, immense difficulties, and yeah, they are trying, honestly, their best in the specific point also of involving young people. So yeah, we go slow, but we'll go steady, hopefully also with this new wave that we are trying to inspire with the co-steering group of youth participation strategy is there to be the leading or one of the leading organs, bodies of involving young people in the national agencies and in our own work. And there are many more. And Marlene and Malta from German National Agency will talk about it on Thursday in their open space, the creation of the youth board in the German National Agency. So yeah, I hope not all of you will be able to be there, but I hope that those of you who will be there are able also to transmit to the field, to the community of youth work.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
Okay, thank you so much. I want to, before I ask my question, because it's going to be maybe a bit complex of a question, I just want to comment on it. I come from Albania, I'm in Kela, hi. But we don't actually have a SALTO Albania, so my application was through SALTO for the Western Balkans country in Slovenia, in Ljubljana. And not that it was difficult, actually, but It was, however, my initiative to reach out to them or to be here today. So they didn't approach me, I approached them. However, I believe that youth and youngsters are the moving lever of society, the biggest force. And in Albania, there have been many deep changes and huge impacts that came through young activists, volunteers, trainers, and so on and so forth. People engaged in youth participation, like reducing the university fees to half. Even now we're trying to reduce the voting age so that even people 16 years old can vote and express their opinion on politics and so on and so forth. Now, without further ado and not more stories, my question is in more practical terms. As a youth activist, as a very new, recent coach and trainer, how can I, or what do you advise as professionals, implement methods or ways to increase engagement, first off, and also to not battle, but like to overcome these barriers with other institutions? You say that you need a perfect balance. How do you get to that perfect balance? It's very difficult, because if I come up with this great idea and I have this great project in my head, with or without an organization backing me up, a team of people, I might face many obstacles when it comes to implementing it, to putting it into practice. How would you advise me, and how can I, overcome these and increase the engagement of people, and also make sure that they are more involved? Because not everybody will go to SALTO's website and come here and be as I am here today. I hope it was clear as a question, and thank you.
And we will have moments during the forum for that, but as an immediate react, we have Kelly. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the brilliant question. And I must say, I'm still thinking about Pietro's question, but I see a link between them. But just from my personal perspective, the thing that I feel is that, first of all, that the word complexity was mentioned several times during the introduction and whatnot, but we have to understand that I personally also sometimes feel like, darn, why is everything so complex? There is a current inside me that wants to manage the complexity. But then I take a step back and I realize that, wait a minute, complexity, complex world is a byproduct of a freer world. It's not a bad predicate. It's rather something good. So in some way, I always have to remind myself that, okay, I have to look for an opportunity in this complexity. So just to say that, I don't know, I assume I'm not alone in the room, that I feel psychologically sometimes the frustration that, it would be so nice if things were neat and simple, but more intellectually, I remind myself that no, actually it wouldn't be better. It would be probably quite horrendous. So just to pinpoint that to begin with. There are institutions, there are many institutions. This is part of the complexity. And when I think about the youth field, then I also feel that there is a little bit of a current in it to, we are quite protective. We don't want to necessarily always interlink with the institutions. And I'm not saying that applies every time across the board, but there is a certain, defense reaction sometimes. Like we want to keep our nice, cool, informal bubble. And that's fine. There's a place for that, of course. But at the same time, again, this is just from my personal experience, I feel that we have to be not afraid to sort of, to penetrate the institutions, to actually, open up this Pandora's box and see what we can do together, how we can cooperate, because seriously, there is no puppet master somewhere pulling the strings and making the institutions inherently work against us. It's just that the complexity might make it seem that way. Now, if you're asking for some kind of specific advice, of course I can't give you very specific advice because I'm not so familiar with your context. But what I would say is that one thing is to look for opportunities wherever you can, to look for points of cooperation wherever you can. You might not always be welcomed with open arms, like the example you gave, but nonetheless you have to be persistent. And another thing what I feel is that if we think about just sort of the just simple role of a democratic citizen, no matter how old or young they are, you know, we are supposed to put pressure on power. And nowadays it's very easy to escape into our bubbles, into our worlds. Yeah. So sometimes we even might escape into activism bubble a little bit. And again, there's a place and time for that. I'm not saying that's bad, but remind yourself to come out of it. Remind that, okay, I need to actually look for a difficulty. You know, I need to look for these moments where I can challenge someone and someone can challenge me back. I mean, democracy can't work without that. You know, it can't work without dialogue that actually challenges us. It can't work with a dialogue that's just simple and we all agree, right? That's not gonna work. That's not gonna enrich us. That's not gonna make us smarter. That's not gonna make us think more deeply, and that's definitely not gonna make us function in a complex world. So I don't know if it helps you, but those are my 5 cents worth of advice.
Yeah, Alexandre, I think.
I think I cannot give you advice because my experience is that the people that are here are doing the work on the field, and you know better, like Kelly said, the difficulties that you're facing. I can just give you my own 2 cents of answer, like Kelly said, that one thing is individual is never to give up on your idea, and this is not a coaching session, but it's just to never give up, because I had many times this experience that I gave up on an idea. Don't know if it was the best idea ever or the worst, but I gave up on that idea personally that could have brought something to the field or not, but the point maybe not to give up. And the second, I think it's like Kelly said, and there is a person next to me on my left that is very good at bringing these institutions, bringing different structures together, breaking those defensive walls, is to try to act as this person. I think we need people that build bridges, and I'm sounding so cliche, but we need more and more. We might get offended, we might get defensive. We might, from our side as an institution, as a structure, we might give you answers that are like, sorry, we cannot help you, go to this way. And it happens quite often. It might be because we are with 10 other things on top of us. But be insisting, be courageous, and believe in your own word. And the second or third thing that I want to mention is that we had, for example, last year in the SALTO Awards, I think for the digital transformation category, we had one project that was made by one person that made a big change in schools, if I remember, in library, automated the library in schools. We have projects this year, I think, in the top 3 of youth participation category for the SALTO Awards that you're going to see next Thursday, that were, one of them was self-funded or crowd-funded. We can go into the debate if youth work should be voluntary, if youth work should be using other tools and other sources of funding, but I'm just giving an example that, and in possibly more difficult contexts than the European Union. But to say that I don't feel qualified to give you concrete advice, but personally, this is the best I can do.
On a very concrete side, on communication, it's our role to make sure that the information reaches you. So it will be SALTO Southeast Europe. Unfortunately, you don't have an NA, but that's also my role, particularly to support the national agencies to make sure that the opportunities are promoted as it should be. And then it's your role of youth organizations to also disseminate the information on your local stage and to make sure to engage youth. I think there is this idea of complexity, and I just came in, so I also got it in my face and trying to figure it out and to make it understandable for everyone. And so I need to go through this process myself to understand. I mean, I was first meeting after 2 days, snack. I was like, what are they talking about? It's insane. Like, how can you communicate this? But I think in the end, for having met both sides, we are all human beings. It's quite, so I don't know how is SALTO Southeast Europe, how easy it is to reach them. But I think just like Reet was saying, or other national agencies, they are like, stupid point, but they are like us, like that. And I don't see a difference between you and me, between me and them. Like it. So I think we can also, there are these barriers that I don't know where they come from, honestly, for being naive, maybe. But I think we also need to make this work that, okay, I have a project, I have an idea, I will just reach to SALTO Southeast Europe and let's see what they say.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, above all, human resources and human beings around in different roles. It was really amazing, I think, to have all this packed information. Thank you was a word that was heard many times. That means gratefulness of being here and having the chance also to hear all these points. And we need to take care of ourselves and our energy. So this is the moment that we will close for now. A coffee break for the ones that they are here with coffee, tea, juice for half an hour. A coffee break also for the ones being at home, because we will live stream also the second part. We have two very inspiring keynote speeches, and we need people with eye communication and energy full back for questions. So thank you very much for the attendance. Thank you, and thank you for being here.
So welcome back. Welcome back also at home in the live streaming. We're going to continue our program for today with two amazing keynote speeches. Small presentation we're going to enjoy, be inspired, and maybe even discuss and raise questions about. So I guess without further ado, we're going to start right away with Anna Lavizarri and meaningful youth participation, social movement, new and alternative practices. So I welcome right away to the stage, and we're going to get started. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. So, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. First of all, let me thank the Alexandre, who invited me personally, and the organizing committee for inviting me at this wonderful event. I just arrived in Tallinn a few hours ago from Italy, Florence, where I'm based. Actually, I left my place at more or less 4 this morning, so it has already been like an incredible long day for me. But again, I'm very happy to be here and to meet you and to have this speech and hopefully discussion with you. Just a few words about me. I'm here on behalf of the European Commission Council of Europe Youth Partnership. I'm a member of the pool of European youth researchers. And like in general life, I am a researcher, but I work mostly in academia. I focus on youth participation, of course, but also more broadly social movement studies. So you will see my presentation is also, my speech presentation is also very much focused on, let's say, that side of activism. And I combine these two broad strands of research with gender studies as well. So my plan for the next 20 minutes, more or less, is to speak a bit about meaningful youth participation and so-called alternative practices, especially, as I was saying, vis-à-vis with respect to social movements. This presentation, this talk today, is based mostly on a research study that I conducted together with 2 other colleagues at Payer on meaningful youth participation is the title of the study, and I've seen it's also outside on the desk if you want to pick it up. It was published last year. You can also find it online, of course, and what I'm going to try to do is to extrapolate some of the findings from this study, but mostly I would say give some inputs for further discussion. So conventional, unconventional, alternative, meaningful. I believe that all of you in this room recognize this picture. So it's an act of protest. Perhaps we can call it an alternative act of protest, question mark. It's done by two activists, environmental activists of the Just Stop Oil Collective. They have it displayed on their t-shirt. And they threw tomato soup at this famous Van Gogh's painting in London. And this was an event that actually caused indeed much attention from the media, generalists and non-generalist media. And it's also an event that sparkled much discussion within activists and movement circles too. One of the questions that was raised is precisely what type of activism is this? What is the worthiness of this act of protest? Or even more broadly, is it right? Is it wrong? Rather than trying to claim, to defend, to tell us. So I think the idea of talking about alternative forms of participation comes obviously from the general discussion on the different types, modes of political participation among young people. And I will refer today in my talk to conventional, unconventional, and alternative, of course, even if I'm aware that many of us, possibly all of us, consider nowadays these distinctions or definitions, typologies, a bit obsolete. But for the sake of clarity, I just wanted to make this disclaimer that I'm gonna still use them. So on the one hand, I would like to reflect with you on the broader question I think we should ask ourselves when we were speaking about this topic, that is, alternative to what? So alternative forms, alternative to what exactly? On the other hand, I want to spend some time, as I was saying at the beginning, on the concept of meaningfulness. Because I think that alongside the types of or forms of political engagement that are chosen by young people, it is fundamental to ask ourselves, especially if we spend time and resources to promote participation, what concretely makes participation meaningful for young people and for us, of course. Therefore, from the start, I would like to invite you to reflect on this and keep these two questions on the back of your mind. Among the general findings that we put forward in the study in trying to understand what makes youth political participation meaningful, we start from the starting point that there exist different approaches that try to clarify this term. Meaningful youth participation is at times not defined at all, meaning that all participation is considered meaningful. It is sometimes defined more in a circular way. So in this sense, participation is considered meaningful when it is linked with decisions that will have meaningful impacts on young people's lives. Or it may be also defined using like a list of aspects that, of course, we can debate about together that makes it meaningful. Just to give an example, because they were mentioned before, speakers from the previous panel mentioned them, information can be considered a crucial aspect. Young people need to be able to access information that is also youth-friendly, for instance. authority and voice. Young people need to be granted, let's say, the right amount of authority to voice their concerns. Power sharing, we also mentioned, someone mentioned before this word, which is, I'm thinking here in particular to co-creation and co-management practices between young people and stakeholders. As well, of course, material and non-material support and resources. I think it is also important to keep in mind that the perception of meaningfulness of a given participatory process or mechanism that was also mentioned differs widely from one context to the other. Maybe you have some conventional activities that are meaningful in one context and not in another. As well, it goes the same for unconventional types of participation. So what we say in the study is that meaningful participation can only be defined, of course, in terms of the context and the aims of a given participatory process. We explored in our study different type of, if you want, democratic environments in relation to these participatory aims, which are based in different, if you want, reasons or justifications that make participation worth it. For instance, if we think at the European Union Youth Strategy, which is focused around these three broad concepts of engage, connect, and empower, we can understand these three different as aims or justification for meaningful youth participation. And we can also think that political participation happens, broadly speaking, and this is the meaning of this slide, when the aims overlap with opportunities provided by the specific democratic environment in which we found ourselves in. Of course, this democratic environment is very much linked to the socio-political realities, cultural realities in which young people live. Finally, on this point, I would say that it's also important to keep in mind that different meaningful youth political participation activities or forms do not exclude each other. They can often actually found alongside each other, and would see how the idea of alternative forms feed into this as well. They complement each other and they are intertwined. Again, in the study, we mentioned, as you see, just a table, but you see different type of democratic environments with participatory mechanisms linked to them, who's involved, and more or less the outcomes that come out from this scheme. The takeaway, I will say, from this more theoretical part, that I promise I'll go more into empirical finding, if you want. So it's try to think, as I was saying, in terms of aims and justification in relation to the context where this happened, and try to understand where, in which context, some activities, be conventional, unconventional, or alternative, are meaningful, and the combination of them as well. Now, trying to delve deeper in the discussion, as mentioned, we want to know how emergent and alternative forms of participation feed into meaningful political participation. And to address this question, I will start from the idea of drivers and conditions to these alternative forms. I think, and I hope that in this room we can all agree again that against the claim that young people in the past, or at least in past decade, have disengaged from institutional politics. They are, mostly, they are and they continue to be interested very much in politics, and they do actively participate in our democratic lives. But yes, even if we can take this for granted, we do observe changes with respect to the past that drive young people to participate in different modes. So based on our study, but also very much previous and current research, drivers to alternative forms of participation can include, as I was mentioning now, sort of disaffection with established political institutions and political elites, I would add. Distant from their life, we know that very much. So in this sense, we can think of alternative forms as alternative to traditional, institutional. This, I think, it's the easier or the easiest point. We can think of a sense of increased efficacy that is felt by young people when they try to express their views through especially everyday actions, such as lifestyle politics, connective actions, prefigurative politics. I will come back to this later. There is indeed, this is linked to the previous point, there is indeed a growing or an established even concern among young people with self-expression and individualization. Again, here I connect to the idea, for instance, of connective action. And there is also a condition that is more linked to the idea of flexibility and intermittent type of engagement that possibly it's more suitable to the lives of a young person. So let's say that among the main reasons for the adoption of alternative forms, evidence suggests that the demands and needs of young people can be more easily met by this type of non-institutionalized and especially, I would say, non-electoral forms of politics. It's a long, continuous debate. That is the one, again, on conventional and unconventional forms that I was mentioning. But even if we consider some of these alternative forms as more fluid, individualized, and personalized, for instance, in the sense of individual lifestyle choices that I think also many of us make. We can also point to the fact that young people tend to engage nowadays on sorts of issue or cause-oriented informal and spontaneous practices. This is another, I think, well-established evidence that we have in our hands. There is a warning, though, that I would like to make. That is the one not to try to encapsulate in this idea of alternative forms like, a catch-all approach or definition in which we include every type of forms that is not more institutionalized. Along this line, I will also point to the fact that alternative forms are not necessarily completely detached from institutions, as institution may be, for instance, the target of some forms, some alternative forms. We think about protests, for instance. But they can also be the setting in which, the arenas in which alternative forms take place. If you think about the market in general and practices such as boycotting or boycotting. Together with this, and to conclude on this point, I think it's also important to acknowledge that some forms of some alternative practices have become more and more institutionalized. So we say this, for instance, in the social movement communities, that protests nowadays can be mostly almost considered an institutionalized practice. There is a point that in my opinion, it's also very important to make, and it was also more or less mentioned before, and it is a point on, if you want, the conflictual element of these practices in a positive term. So for conflict, I mean that in general, there is a need for a certain degree of antagonism that is present within these practices, and that is in contrast to, if you want, more hegemonic practices that aim at building and organizing consent. And the point here is not to avoid or foreclose this type of conflictuality or antagonism, but instead try to find a space for it a dialogue, as we mentioned before, that can be creative and supportive for each one of us, not only for young people. In our study as well, now I will go more into the empirical side, and we mentioned several of these practices, which we label as well in different ways. And for instance, we talk about prefigurative politics, we talk about do-it-yourself or ourselves politics, direct social actions, or artivism. You can see a table in which, as I was saying before, it tends to be kind of catch-all approach, a table with forms of do-it-yourself or ourselves politics, which is like a concept that we use to emphasize the entrepreneurial nature of these forms done by young people. And there are, of course, again, in this table, a number of forms that actually combine aspects that are more conventional with aspects that are less conventional and more or less conflictual, as I was mentioning. Related to these type of forms, I mentioned we have, for instance, direct social actions, which I think are very important and visible nowadays, especially after the financial economic crisis and then the pandemic crisis. And these are forms of, for instance, collective action that want to directly change by means of the very action itself some aspects of society, and they are not mediated. So they are done directly and they target society at large, and I'll give you an example in a second. Prefigurative politics is also very important, that I think very much present nowadays in the repertoire of young people's engagement, and is, if you want, very simple terms, embody so being the change you want to see. So embody your political vision about the future. So your political ideals are actually actualized in the present. And for instance, here there are ongoing experimentations. If we think about radical municipalism, that is something that is kind of widespread in Spain. For instance, Barcelona is a very good example in which there are programs that vary from city to city, and they have like this broader goal to try to defend human rights and especially the commons, so the common goods, or for instance to feminize politics, among other things. Here I come to the examples, and then I will take a couple of minutes more and finish. You have in these pictures, for instance, examples of direct social actions that I was talking about. So distributing food, something that we became very familiar, for instance, during the pandemic. You have an example of community gym, that it's a very kind of widespread practice in Italy. Community gyms are basically spaces within urban settings, so cities that are often abandoned buildings, and that they are recovered by groups of young people and citizens to actually transform them, for instance, into gyms and provide free services to the community of the neighborhood. Oftentimes they're also attached to very maybe specific political traditions, so there is a very strong political meaning attached to that as well. Here I give some example instead of what can we think about in terms of prefigurative politics. This, queer nation queer nation manifesto, in which think about you want to be, you embody the change you want to see in the future. So the idea of creating, for instance, a queer nation, but you can think about also ecological villages and so on. On the other side, you have a vignette, which is something very much used, all the visuals in these alternative form. It's a vignette that was created by, again, a feminist collective, movement, Italian movement, Non Una di Meno, for the 8th March strike, in which they use a very recognizable, story, fairy tale, and they subvert the meaning of this, specifically by pointing at its normative and patriarchal character. And it said, I'm tired of being afraid of the wolf. It's something that everybody can relate to. And this went viral. The point to explain this was also to introduce in my talk, of course, the role of social media. I don't have the time to go in depth into that, but of course, social media and digital technologies are fundamental also to this type of forms. And finally, again, I continue on the wave of feminist movements. You have two examples here. One, I think you can recognize on the top for you as well, which is basically this performative action that went viral, spread globally. I think it was 2019. It's a performative act created by a feminist collective in Chile called Las Tesis Against Feminicides. And here again, I'm including this example to show you how also this performative action can be very much transnational and actually travel very fast, very quickly, again, through social media all over the places. On the bottom, you have an example of another performative act that make use of a very recognizable symbolism taken from a novel, The Handmaid's Tale. And this is a group, another feminist collective, making this performance during in Milan during a discussion about an anti-abortion measure. So again, very provocative, I think, very impactful. I forgot to mention that, for instance, Las Tesis collective, feminist collective, they were included in 2020 by the Time in the list of 100 most influential people around the globe. So also to make the point that it can be very successful. So to sum up, I just make some points that I think we should take into consideration when we talk about alternative forms of participation. First of all, usually they have like a fluid and a horizontal nature. We know that very well. There is a sort of normalization of practices of dissent and conflict that I mentioned before. I think this is very important. The role of prefigurative politics, and more like comprehensive and expanding range of direct social action and do-it-yourself politics. There is an interplay, this is also very important, of collective and individual actions, and these actions have also different positions relative to institutions and political authorities. This point I've already made on antagonism. And finally, the entrepreneurial nature, as especially personal initiatives taken by young people. If you can think about others, I will be happy to discuss. And I leave you, final, sorry, I'm a bit late, with basically, I think, 3 questions that I thought about that maybe we can discuss later. So if you can think of new forms of collectivity that also combine participation, individualization, and presentification, so think about prefigurative politics, for instance. If you think that these are defining feature of alternative and emerging forms of participation, and most importantly, what can we do to make such forms visible and meaningful, not only for young people, which I believe they think of them as meaningful, but also for institutions and authorities. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I think it was very helpful also to widen a bit our understanding of participation, also of political participation. And now we have a bit of time to open a bit the floor also to the group, to some questions you want to ask, Anna, something specific about the... Here we have.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. Really nice to get this information here. One of the things, of course, we talk now about unconventional forms of political participation. On the same time, we also have the reality that a lot of political decisions are made at institutions. And one of the things that often I'm worried about is that even though I think it's great that our generation focuses on unconventional forms and much more than older generations, is that we often lack participations when it comes to formal institutions. How would you say that, how do you see or analyze that the fact that we more and more engage in informal forms of participation and less than formal participation, and how do we avoid that we only focus on the informal part, while, for instance, voting is still crucial in order to get to enforce change or get things done?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Hi.
Okay. I agree with you that it's true that young people tend to prefer, we can say that, unconventional forms, but nonetheless, they still vote. I mean, a lot of young people still vote, I think. I mean, at least what statistics display, maybe. Below average. I will maybe turn your question upside down, in the sense that maybe one thing that we can do is to promote forms, as I was saying, that combine both aspects and are not that dichotomous in keeping them completely separate. That would be a solution. I don't know which terms can be communications, it can be very practical terms. But I would also ask ourselves, and unfortunately I think there is no answer yet, and I don't know if it's for lack of attention or willingness, but why this like more formal participatory mechanisms do not work for young people. They are not appealing almost at all. So I don't have a precise question, but I will try to, get closer to preferences of young people and, my personal opinion, try to adjust formal mechanisms instead of forcing young people to engage in a more formal mechanism. That will be my answer, but thank you.
Thank you.
First, thank you for the talk. I would like to ask, what do you think are the best ways to encourage young people in particular in authoritarian countries, or if we speak in terms of Erasmus Plus project, we also have the countries, the neighboring countries in participating that are, face quite some issues in terms of human rights, especially in the eastern part of the neighboring countries. So what do you think are the best ways to encourage that kind of participation and expression of their will? And thank you.
I think in that sense it's not only in more authoritarian settings, but in general, if you think also, I also do gender studies, so if you also think in terms of gender and especially young women's LGBTQI plus participation, it would be very much important to promote the existence of so-called safe spaces to participate, to engage, safer spaces. I think that would be fundamental, and these safe spaces are meant to be offline, physical, but also online. I think, for instance, digital safety, it's a very important concept and practice that should be promoted in the future, advanced, especially also to protect young people and human rights defenders in more like oppressive or politically difficult contexts. I would say that.
Thank you. Anybody else or any more questions?
Coming back to what the first question was, and I will not let you go easily on this, that if you would be now a spin doctor of some political party, and based on what you and your colleagues did a research, what would you say to that political party? What should they do immediately?
Sorry. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Luckily, I'm not a spin doctor, but I would say, well, first of all, what we say about, in general, not only young people, but try to really get in touch, so go on the ground, speak to young people, listen to them, and maybe, why not? I think co-creation, co-management practices can be a positive way out of this, in trying, I was saying before, co-create mechanisms, other alternative mechanisms that combine different practices to engage more people. I would say that. I don't know if that's enough, but thank you.
You might get some follow-up questions after. Anything else? More?
Hi. Thank you so much for pointing out on the alternative part. Alternative to what, right? And I would dare ask you a couple of things. One, being alternative, does it make it more meaningful? Second, does it make it more efficient? And three, how can we touch upon this tension of being both involved in structural traditional forms and the alternative ones? Does it have to be either or maybe there is a way in between? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think I'll start from your last point, because I think that's what we are trying to discuss. And again, my personal answer, but it is great if we can discuss about it. My personal answer, it will be a combination of the two. Then, to make this meaningful, once again, I think I will make also a patchwork of my previous answers and say that to make it meaningful, again, I think one important point is to try to adapt it as much as possible to the context you're faced in, which you're working in. Again, ask young people, listen to them. Efficiency, is it something that we really want, for instance, that all our political action are immediately efficient? I don't know, question mark. I also open this as a question. But yeah, the point of being like alternative and meaningful and efficient, it's not a straight and easy answer. It's contextual. It can be, if you consider efficiency or meaningfulness by the way, for instance, it's spread through the social media, it's up to you also to, I think, to assess what is efficiency. But it's a good question, yeah. Thank you.
Good, and we might have time for one more question. One or a couple more, maybe one. We have a follow-up question.
I would like to ask you, what do you think, are there any borders when it comes to alternative approaches in terms that they don't become too counter-indicative? As for instance, you showed the picture of damaging the Van Gogh picture. It was, I guess, perceived by the majority of society as unnecessary. Not unnecessary, but like, you know what I mean.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Where is the border?
Where is the border? I'm not going to go into my personal answer to that, but I think precisely the point to show you that picture, it is that there is an ongoing discussion as well on, again, what type of alternative forms of practice are more effective, what are you trying to communicate with this act of protest. You say that most of society, I think, also filtered by the narrative of mainstream media has, embraced the idea that it was largely unnecessary. I think if you ask some, few young people if they agree with that statement, they would say no, that actually was very much effective and necessary in their own terms. But the idea, you mentioned the idea of borders, I think it's a very interesting one. So yeah, thanks for your point.
Okay, the last one, here we go.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add something to this answer. Because I'm part of the youth climate movement, so we discussed the same issue, whether throwing soup on a payment is the right way to do it. And personally, I would say, it can create also a lot of conflicts, but at the same time, they open a lot of doors as well. So in my country, in the Netherlands, we had 1 week full of discussions about how should we protest and how urgent is the issue of climate change, and it has opened a lot of doors for our party as well. So I would say maybe some people react in a way like this is not the way we should do it, but it keeps people thinking, and that's also why we, as our organization, could go to television shows, newspapers, and stuff like that. So it is a combination of two.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess that raises also this the relevance, no, and the subjectivity of what is the limit for some, what is the limit for others, what are the strong points or not. I would like to thank Anna for one more time. So thank you very much. I know she left us with a lot of questions, and that's good because we're going to continue questioning during the rest of the days. Before we move to the next one, I will just ask you to stand up for a second, just shake it a little bit, move a little bit around, make sure your butt is not square. The people at home can do the same, in case you have a butt. So just move a little bit because we're going to get started with the next one very soon. So you can take your seat, and I invite Andreas Karsten to the stage. And I pass this to you.
Thank you.
Okay, enjoy.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, more questions. More questions are coming. Get ready. I want to have a critical look with you at how we foster youth participation in democratic life through Erasmus Plus Youth. Even though we have 2 European youth programs, I want to focus on Erasmus Youth in my presentation. And I will very briefly introduce Ray. Carmen has done a lot of that already in the morning or in the first part of the afternoon. I have 3 reminders that I think for a lot of people in the room are reminders, but they're also especially affirmations for the work that we do in the context of the European Youth Programs. Then I have 3 questions and 3 invitations. And then I hope we have as lively a discussion with as difficult questions as we just saw with Anna. So, Ray, in a nutshell, we are the research network of the European Youth Programs created by national agencies in 2008. You already know what our name stands for, Research-Based Analysis of the European Youth Programs. We are self-governed and independent, which means nobody can mess with our research unless we decide collectively as a network that that's okay. So what maybe is important to understand is where our data comes from. We have thematic research projects where we employ a mixture of qualitative and quantitative methods. What I want to focus on this afternoon is, though, the data that we have from our monitoring surveys. So we do them every 2, and sometimes if a pandemic intervenes, every 3 years. And you see here that over time then, these data sets built into quite massive numbers, right? So we have surveyed more than 63,000 project participants over the previous program generation and more than 13,000 project team members, project leaders. So thank you to every single person in the room who has ever seen our survey, decided to pull through to the end, even though they might be a tad too long. and made it possible that now we have such massive data sets with which we can do so many things in terms of analysis and contributing to the implementation and impact research of the programs. So the 3 reminders, the 3 affirmations, I think are generally very happy ones. I hope at least they're happy ones. Okay. You never know. So the first one, and maybe to say these graphics I have borrowed from the Norwegian National Agency, Bufdir, who have recently redone their website in an attempt to relaunch the Erasmus program post-pandemic in Norway just a couple of weeks ago. And these illustrations are from their team of graphic illustrators that they have worked with for the relaunch of their website. Also very cool website, really. So the first affirmation, the first reminder is that the European Youth programs both are intercultural learning at their best. And I have a couple of numbers from our quantitative work, from our monitoring surveys, to make that more plain. So we asked, for example, project participants, that's always what the PP in the end of the question there stands for. We asked them, do you appreciate cultural diversity more than before the project? Right? And almost 66%, 2/3 of project participants say, yes, we do. And you see down here, so how do I do this pointing thing? The pointer is up here. And you see, woohoo, fancy. So you see down there in small script, for the people who are the most curious among you, we always explain a little bit what the other response options were, so in case you were ever, right? So there are 32.7% who say it's the same than before the project, right? Mostly the ones who had previous experience. But then there are also 1.6% who appreciate cultural diversity less than before the project. Now, you, as much as we, really want to run a research project finding out who these 1.6% are and what happened with them. But the larger picture is really 2/3 of project participants come out, even of the short and small scale projects that we run in these programs, appreciating cultural diversity more than before they started the project. They also learn new things about cultural diversity. Right? Almost 70% say we learned something about cultural diversity in the project that we were involved in. And also, through my participation in this project, I improved my ability to get along with people who have a different cultural background. 95% either strongly agree or agree with that statement. So really, intercultural learning at its best, something we could and should and hopefully also are proud of. The second reminder, youth empowerment, youth participation at its best, right? So we ask our surveys usually 6 to 10 months or so after a project finished. That's what we reach. So we ask them, do you engage in civil society more than before the project? And that's a good 1/3 of project participants say, yeah, true for us, right? We actually do more, we are active more in civil society than before the project. 62% say it's more or less the same than before the project, nothing has changed. And again, the small number that we are particularly curious about. 2.4% who say it's actually for us at the moment it's less. But you see also quite an activating impact that the programs have on the young people that we involve. I actively contribute to environmental protection more than before the project, right? You have seen some of the alternative forms of protest in Anna's presentation. 35% say that's true for them. But what's interesting is really to also see that development over time, right? So actively contributing to environmental protection more than before the project is something that over the past program generation has increased from 31% of project participants saying it all the way up to 43%. So really quite a development, which is probably a mixture of environmental awareness of young people changing, but also environmental awareness of project organizers and organizations and beneficiaries of the program changing. So a mixture of these two things. And then the third reminder, the programs are non-formal education at its best, right? Not only because project participants understand the concept better, which they do, right? 90% say we do understand that better now. Also because they have learned more about how to foster non-formal learning in youth work. And improving the ability to have more fun when learning, right? Also not the worst thing in the world to do. So these three things we collectively, as the field of national agencies, organizations, networks, groups of young people, project participants, project teams, we do that very well. What is particularly nice about the aspect of non-formal learning is that usually, generally across the programs and its different project formats, we manage to level the learning field for young people with fewer opportunities. And why is that so extraordinary? Is because generally our projects do not lead to further inequalities in learning outcomes. Right? So it doesn't matter whether you come from a rural area and a socioeconomically disadvantaged young family. If you make it into the program, and that's the big trick, if you make it into the program, generally learning outcome for you are the same as for everyone else. Right? And that is, at least for us in research, so exciting because generally in education, that's not the case. Right? There is something that we call the Matthew effect of accumulated advantage, which means you walk into educational processes with an advantage because you come from an academic family, you have a library at home, you have access to books, you have permanent access to the internet, and that usually means that your learning outcomes in educational processes are better than compared to the young people who don't have these kind of advantages. And in the European youth programs, that does not happen, which is really quite cool. And then one of the larger questions we have to ask ourselves, how do we make this more possible for more young people, right? But then, three questions that I have for you and for us. First one, very simple one. How are we going to step up our game on social media and in informal digital spaces, right? And I stop throwing numbers at you, but I'm just going to tell you a few of the tendencies we have seen in our surveying work. So something that we have seen, for example, is how do young people encounter the European youth programs first, right? And it used to be that youth organizations played a big role in that. And it also used to be that national agencies played a relatively small role in that. That's still the case, but what has changed is that the role of youth organizations has decreased and the role of friends and acquaintances, but also of the internet and social media has gone up enormously. So young people find the programs more in informal digital spaces. And then the question is, how do we become better at being in these spaces, not just for the people who know us because they have been involved in the programs, but for the people who have no idea we actually exist? And I think it's fair to say that at the moment, we are not spectacularly good at that yet. So the question that we have to answer as a field is, how do we get better at that? Second question, how do we create more and better spaces for socio-political discourse and youth activism in the European youth programs, right? A question that Anna touched already upon and also some of your questions started stirring up. Because what has changed over the past program generation is that young people participate in the European Youth Program because they want to become involved in social or political issues more often than before. And what is interesting here, and a challenge to the work that we do, is that there is an increasing gap between what project teams think in some of these aspects and what project participants think in some of these aspects. And we have this at several points in our monitoring surveys where we ask project teams and project participants the same kind of question so that we can do these kind of comparisons. So what you see here is the responses to have project participants develop the skill to discuss political topics seriously. That's how we phrase it at the moment. And you see at the top the development over time of project teams and project leaders who started out 65% saying, yeah, they developed their skill. That was all right. Going all the way up to 81% in our last surveying round, right? So 4/5 of project teams said, yeah, young people developed that skill. But then look at project participants themselves, whose assessment of that skill development has essentially not changed over time. Right? So project teams are convinced they're doing better than project participants actually tell them that they are. And that's a problem. Right? If we think we're actually good at developing the skill of project participants to discuss political topics seriously, but they say, right? And it's still a luxury problem to have, right? We have 2/3 of project participants who say this is fine, but we have an increasing gap here, and we have more than 1/3 of project participants who say, yeah, for us, not the case. And then the third question that I have is how we reduce the opening gender gaps that we see evolving for some key aspects of empowerment for participation. Now, generally, I'm happy to say we don't have a lot of gender gaps across the programs and its impact and its implementation, but we have a few, and they're not big, but they're getting bigger. So I've picked 3. Have I picked 3? Maybe I've picked 6. But in any case, here you see 3. So these are some of the gender gaps as they widen, right? So I was able to contribute my views and ideas to the project development. One of the questions we ask, right? How participatory is the project development phase? And you see here, boys and young men responding to our surveys. This value is for strongly agree at 38.4%. Girls and young women responding at 34.4%, right? That did not used to be the case. There was no gender gap, no gender difference here. That has evolved over the past program generation. We have no idea why. We just know it is there, and it is statistically significant, and we think it's also educationally and policy significant. Then in the project, I learned something new about democracy. Again, boys and young men responding, saying 28.6%. Yep, I did. Girls and young women responding 22.9%. And now I need to sneak because the watch is above these numbers. I participated in democratic political life, and then respondents have the chance to say less or the same or more than before the project. And also here you see boys and young men at 28%, girls and young women at 22%. Right? So these are some of the gender gaps that have developed over time that we think deserve attention without necessarily saying how to respond to that educationally or programmatically, but just to say this needs a debate in a space like this. Then I have 3 invitations for you. The first one has to do with the time that we are coming out of, we all hope, right, this pandemic. Because what we shouldn't forget about all the excitement of being able to do forums like this again is that we are still very much ahead of the task of building a truly European post-pandemic recovery and support system for youth work. Now, this number on its own is shocking enough, right? Has the corona pandemic affected your youth work? 74% of youth work across Europe said yes, it had major effects. What's much more problematic is that this effect differs between countries where youth work is inscribed in law, has relatively stable funding through local communities and local authorities, and the majority of European countries who do not yet have these rights and that kind of stable funding. So there are countries in Europe where youth work has crumbled, where the foundations of Europe have been not only shaken, but partly been destroyed. And we also see that already in some of the participation in events like that some countries are less able to send participants, and some participants are less able to come to these events. So the question that we really have is, yes, without dedicated actions, we're undermining the basis of the program in the long run. And then the question that we have is, how can we use the possibilities of the program, even in the smaller projects that we design collectively as the field, to help countries with weak youth work systems who have suffered more from the pandemic than others? So that's one invitation, to consider that in everything that you do. Unfortunately, I have to say, probably for the next 5, 6, or 7 years, certainly for the remaining program generation, the question when you construct partnerships for your projects, the questions of how you distribute the funding within your larger scale projects in particular, how can you use all these mechanisms to support countries with weaker youth work systems better and stronger than we have done and needed to do in the past. Then, a second invitation is, let's please find better ways to empower everyone, including ourselves as a field, to work with policymakers. Because by and large, the projects that try to enhance dialogue with policymakers suffer from one fundamental problem, the absence of policymakers. That's not particularly helpful, right? And very, very often in the project descriptions and the project applications, policymakers are considered as a target group for dissemination, but very rarely are they considered a stakeholder group of project development and project implementation. And that's a fundamental problem that we have to solve. Right, and you see this here in one of the key findings from our thematic research projects on innovation, that very, very often, even in the Key Action 2 projects with large resources that were priding themselves in involving policymakers, very, very often the policymakers were absent because the way we consider them, the way we involve them is simply not getting through to them. And then the third invitation is this one. I think very much connecting to our previous discussion. Let's get us as a field, but also the programs ready, not just for environmentally conscious young people, but also for intersectionally thinking and acting young people. Right? Questions of social equity, of intergenerational equity, of being feminist and acting feminist, and being environmentally conscious and acting so. These things are very often much more strongly connected for young people of the current generation than that used to be the case in the past. And then the questions we have to ask ourselves, if these kinds of forms of activism, if the kind of antagonism that Anna was talking about, if that is arriving in full force in the European youth programs, do we have the formats? Do we have the skills to deal with the kind of dialogue, to deal with the kind of discourse, to deal with the kind of conflict that comes out of that? So that's a big, big question that we have. And you see it also in the developments over time. The relevance of social and environmental issues has gone up, whether that's human rights, whether that's inclusion, whether that's non-discrimination, whether that's environmental and sustainability. All of these has gone up. And questions of personal development, self-empowerment, professional development, these things have gone down in comparison to these social and environmental issues. But then also the question of action has gone up, right? And what young people do after they have been in parts of the program. Active protection of the environment is up, committed action against discrimination is up, active support of inclusion is up, interest in European affairs is up. And again, questions of professional development, learning another language, finding new ways of improving your skills for your job, all of these things, they have not disappeared, but they have gone down in comparison to these. So what we see is really a generational shift over the past 7 years that will only grow stronger over time, and we need to get the program and the programs ready for that. So you see, in sum up, the 3 reminders and affirmations. What we do is intercultural learning, youth empowerment, non-formal education at its best. But then also 3 questions and 3 invitations, because at its best doesn't mean that we don't have things to improve. Social media gaps, policy discourse gaps, gender gaps are all things that need our attention. And then finally, the 3 invitations for better, smarter, more wide-reaching recovery support, to rethink our dialogue with policy and to take intersectionality and young people who demand it seriously. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was, again, I feel that you are sitting in a gold mine of data somewhere. Very interesting to mine and to see. Let's open up for questions again. Here we go.
Thank you so much. No. I'll be super easy, I promise. For your presentation, it just happened by chance that I was privileged enough to very recently join a dissemination activity in Italy on Ray, led by Adelete Naburi, who's here. And it was very participatory moment, getting to the core of the topics you presented. And in this regard, I would like you to, if possible, elaborate a little bit more on the gender point. My question is the following, and maybe Dr. Lavizarri wants to jump in as well from her gender studies perspective, just to merge the two keynotes. The social enterprise I run worked with the very young target within European projects, of course. And we always struggle, both in the application process, monitoring, evaluation process, on the gender point. Because newer generations of young teenagers have much different approach towards gender matters, which don't fall anymore at all in any kind of form like tick box. So my question was, if within your research group and you got the chance to think about that and somehow, and I, as youth worker, I personally quit even asking, participants to define themselves according to gender.
Now, so we still do ask at the moment. Whether or not we will ask going forward is an open question. And what we look at in our statistical analysis is, though, because we are unfortunately forced to do that, is only, the binary male-female gender identification, because our respondents very rarely self-identify as something else. They have the option in our surveys, not very elegantly, right? It's surveys that were designed in 2012, where the discussion was just at a different level compared to today. And but so few of our respondents self-identify as non-binary in any way or shape or form that statistical analysis doesn't make sense for that small group, which we find as the researchers doing this work enormously frustrating, right? Because we know that youth work is actually quite decent at working with gender diversity, at least in parts of the field. And so that so few of them are part of our response group is a matter of ongoing frustration. But what I think is fair to say is that in the past, the programs didn't show these kind of gender gaps for these points. And to see them developing, we think, is a matter of concern, in particular because the majority of project participants and also the majority of respondents to our surveys are actually female in the program, right? But that there is something at play, and what that is, we have, of course, we have, working theories about that, but we have no research to prove that at the moment. So to not just ignore that, we think is important. And that's, from the basis of the data that we have, probably all that I can say before I start speculating. I can speculate if you want, but yeah.
Okay, since you open up, I don't know if Anna has something to add or.
Quickly, that it sounds okay. Okay. Yeah.
Which one is working, Eric? The handle.
Okay. No, just to say that obviously, if you were referring, I cannot see you. Okay, sorry. If you were referring to just statistical analysis, we know that it's highly normative in many ways. There are emerging studies that suggest how to adapt statistics and to build like a survey questionnaire in order to be much more inclusive. But if you talk mostly in terms of research only, I would suggest that you try at least to back up always at this stage statistical analysis with more like qualitative work on these topics. It's essential.
Thank you. So any more questions?
Hi, I think this research has a very the way you present it also is really activating and making us responsible in also disseminating this. But I wonder how is the structure, as I'm kind of new in this forum, how is the structure working until now in disseminating this and with this activating role? And like I'm from Belgium. I didn't really know about this while I'm working in an organization for participation, and the organization that informed me about this call was very short, not saying this is interesting, have a look, but not giving any context. While I think that there's a responsibility for the organization, I don't want to blame them now, but in giving more context and this activating and really making everyone responsible in this,
It's, I mean, you know, the dissemination of our research findings is, I would say, an ongoing struggle and challenge, right? I mean, in part because the core task of everyone in the programs is first and foremost to implement their projects and the program and not to conduct research and discuss about it, right? So it's, and still the reason why we created the network in 2008 and keep believing in it and keep expanding it and doing qualitative thematic research projects to start digging into research findings like this new one about the gender gaps, for example, is because we believe it really helps the implementation of the program both at project and at an agency level. You know, we do a couple of things that I think we are quite decent at, right? The youth research dialogues that Carmen talked about earlier this afternoon, I think are quite a cool format that also sees, you know, a good amount of pickup. But yeah, I think we would love to do more, is fair to say. That takes time and resources, which we both have to organize, I think is also fair to say. But first and foremost, you know, we are there as a network to conduct research and then communicate the findings. And sometimes, in particular, when you get when you get confronted with a pandemic and then your monitoring surveys are delayed by a year, the conducting the research takes over. But we have both research partners and contact persons in every national agency and in every country. So they are certainly also at and in Belgium, even for every language community, right? So, so there are definitely also contact persons and colleagues at national and or regional level to help with that kind of presentation of research findings, and there are also national research reports. But I think it's sometimes hard also for the colleagues to find their way through the amount of information, because our data sets are not only massive in terms of responses, but also in terms of questions, response options. And I didn't bring the data report with me because it usually fills half my suitcase, just one copy. But it's when we do data reports, I mean, you can basically, you know, it's a good counterweight for many things. And so it's not always easy to do that. But any ideas, suggestions, also invitations to come to events, we are very happy to do what we can.
We have here one more question, which probably might be the last. Let's see. Okay, there's one more.
No, I just wanted to thank both Andreas and thank you also for pointing out this factor of how that, and this is a criticism coming now from me and for us working in the national agency, that what we see here is that rethink dialogue with the policy, and then at the same time we are sitting over these results when we should rethink the dialogue with policy, that we should find justification why these programs exist and use these results of, because at the same time what we hear is that the working, you know, that many municipalities or people working in the municipalities or non-governmental organizations have to justify the work, international work. It's difficult. They need the justification or they need allies. So I think it's really good reminder what you are saying, that, and always, you know, when we see these results here in a colorful summary, it's like you get inspired, but then I think it's something we need to work together. We have to remember there's a European election is coming, so maybe like some kind of, if we would do a little bit each other going this, you know, somehow in the same direction, and you know, it would help. But I just wanted to thank you for reminding that.
Add one sentence in favor of the organization that I just want to say that they do have short some summaries, thank you, of each project, telling what has been learned and so on. But that's on the level of the project, so not on this. Yeah.
Because if you think a policy maker, like that doesn't have a time to read more than, you know, even A4 is too long. So like to provide something sort. Anybody else wants to comment on? Sorry.
He's taking over the space. Right, I like it. You have a... Okay, I think we have time for... You want to go? No. No. We have time for one last question here. But it's a good idea. Colorful, short, nice report.
Okay, so I have two questions.
Okay.
And I want to go a little deeper on one of presented points. Yeah. I engage in civil society more than before the project, and the answer was like all, and the answer, the amount was 35.4%. Can you elaborate on this? Maybe there are like differences between countries or differences in a moment in time. So this is my first question. And second question, do you share your data set, which is quite nice, so that I can, you know, digest it and look for some interesting connections on my own and lose a lot of time on this that you already did?
Well, I start with the second question, and would like to personally welcome you to your next rabbit hole, because we do. You can dig into these data sets as much as you want to with R or SPSS or Stata or anything else that tickles your fancy, which probably makes most people in the room more happy than that. We are also working on building an open data set platform where you can just do with some clicks, and the statistics behind it then a computer script organizes for you. But at the moment we do share and always have shared our data sets, so you can already dig into them as deeply as you want now, but we're going to make that easier in next year and a half or so. And then the engage more in civil society after a project, this kind of activating question and the 35.4%. Yes, there are some differences between countries and also some difference in snapshots over time, but interestingly enough, none that are statistically significant. And you know, there are sometimes projects that just do better, but usually they're also about doing this kind of activation work, right? Trying to get young people who are not currently active in civil society movements or organizations and helping them to become more active. And they have quite understandably a much higher response to that question. And then there are projects who don't have that as a primary focus, where this is a little less. But you know, nothing where we would, from the point of view of research for the implementation of the program, where we would say that's highly awkward or something we would start shouting about.
Okay, thank you very much, Andreas, one more time. And thank you, Anna, again, as well. We are arriving to the end of the live stream, not the end of the session here. We're going to continue for a couple more minutes. But at home, tomorrow we are streaming again, so you're going to be welcome to join us.